We tend to imagine revolutions are won entirely on the battlefield, with muskets, cannons, and militias. But military force requires coordination. If you want to overthrow an established government, your first requirements are logistics and information control. In the early 1770s, these 13 territories were not a cohesive nation. They were deeply fractured, localized entities that squabbled over borders and rarely communicated with one another. The British Crown's authority relied on this physical and political isolation. By keeping the colonies disjointed, the empire ensured that any localized unrest could be contained and suppressed before it spread to a neighbor. Staging a unified resistance across 1,200 miles of coastline required a structural foundation that, in 1770, simply did not exist. By 1772, the Crown started squeezing the few local levers of power the colonists had left. In Massachusetts, the British government began paying the salaries of the governor and judges directly from the royal treasury, stripping the local assembly of its financial influence over its own leaders. Down in Virginia, the Gaspee affair escalated tensions. After Rhode Islanders burned a British customs ship, the Crown set up a commission to extradite suspects straight to England, bypassing the right to a local trial by jury. Protesting these actions was a gamble. The king controlled the official post office, meaning traditional written grievances were easily monitored, intercepted, or censored. Even legal resistance within the colonial assemblies was fragile. If a legislative body attempted to pass resolutions against these policies, the royal governor could simply dissolve the assembly and send the representatives home. This left the colonists in a vacuum. They had no shared government, no safe way to speak to each other, and an opponent who controlled every official channel of information. To break this blockade, the resistance needed a base of operations. The early organizing started right here at Faneuil Hall in Boston. Samuel Adams realized that writing petitions to a king who refused to listen was getting nowhere. Instead, he organized a completely new entity, the Boston Committee of Correspondence. The committee's first major output was the Boston Pamphlet. It functioned as a 3-part manifesto that defined the colonists' natural rights, listed specific British violations, and explicitly invited other towns to form a unified front. Rather than routing through the royal post, Adams distributed the pamphlet like code, sending it directly to town meetings to bypass British eyes. Within 6 months, 118 Massachusetts towns responded. They established their own committees, linking back to Boston and each other. Adams had successfully established the first decentralized political network in the colonies. To challenge the British Empire, the network had to expand beyond the borders of Massachusetts. In Virginia, young radicals like Thomas Jefferson and Dabney Carr saw the potential of the Boston system. Meeting at the Raleigh Tavern in Williamsburg, they pushed for a standing intercolonial committee to link all 13 colonies. To protect this new network, they used political camouflage. They placed respected establishment moderates, like Peyton Randolph, at the public head of the committee. This gave a subversive operation a shield of legitimacy. The radicals effectively tricked the colonial establishment into endorsing the very network that would coordinate its rebellion. For this network to function, it required a high-speed hardware layer to move information without relying on the royal post. This relied on express writers like Paul Revere. They acted as human data couriers, riding off the grid to deliver messages directly to committee members. The Boston Tea Party strained this communication system. Radical leaders had to justify the destruction of property to the other colonies before the Crown could frame the event as a riot. Revere rode the news of the Tea Party from Boston to New York in just 5 days. By outpacing official British dispatches, the network allowed the radicals to establish their account of the events across the continent first. In 1774, Britain passed the Coercive Acts, shutting down the port of Boston to isolate and economically crush the city. Because the intercolonial network was now online, the British isolation strategy failed. The committees synchronized a massive continent-wide economic boycott. This coordinated effort led directly to the convening of the First Continental Congress, proving the shadow network could manufacture a unified national voice. As the crisis deepened, the system evolved again. The committees of correspondence hardened into local committees of safety and inspection. These new groups completely superseded royal authority. They morphed from letter-writing networks into provisional governments that monitored loyalists, stockpiled weapons, and armed local militias. Patriot leaders engineered the uprising by methodically building this institutional infrastructure over several years. Before you can birth a nation, you must first build the connective information infrastructure to unite the people. Information was the first true weapon of the revolution.